Hello. Time again for another Throwing Bagels podcast. And the three of us are reunited once again after Chris Douglas had some soccer referee duties. Chris, welcome back. Glad to have you back.
Appreciate it. Thank you. It's good to be back rather than being in 35, 40 degree weather running in shorts. So,
and I think did I introduce myself? I forget. I'm Kevin. Hi. Hi, Jason.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
We are looking forward to chatting with our next guest. And, yes, we typically focus on SUNY Oswego alumni, but we like to go outside the beaten path every now and again. And that is, and once you find out who we're talking to, you'll certainly understand why. So, but since 2019, he's been the play-by-play broadcaster for the Binghamton Rumble Ponies, and it's also called BU Women's Basketball the past couple of seasons, former anchor at WFAN, CBS Sports Radio, and Sirius XM. And just a couple of weeks ago, he called play-by-play for the MLB playoffs, including the World Series for the MLB Network's telecast in India. It's our pleasure to welcome Jacob Wilkins. Jacob, thanks so much for being with us.
Kevin, Chris, Jason, I apologize for not being a SUNY Oswego alum. It was a tough weekend to be a Penn State alum, but it's great to be with you. Thanks so much for having me on.
It's our pleasure. And first off, congratulations on that opportunity to call MLB postseason games on the MLB Network. What was that experience like for you?
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It was quite an incredible experience, and it's hard to believe that, the World Series just ended, because it really, the planning for it started around August during our Rumble Pony season, when, our friend Mike Ciano came to me and was talking about this plan that Major League Baseball had to broadcast playoff games in India. And it immediately made sense to me. Our analysts who were great were in India. I broadcasted the games out of the MLB Network studios in Secaucus, and for them, obviously there's tons of logistics that have to be. It's not just jumping on a Zoom to connect and make sure the broadcast operations work. And there's so many amazing people that are involved in this project, and to the depths they go to make sure that it runs smoothly. And then once we got to the playoffs, I mean, there's nothing like calling Major League Baseball playoff games. The energy is just different right from the start. And doing the World Series obviously is an incredible bucket list item, but also the wild card series. And basically how it worked, guys, is we had a series per round. I never describe it correctly. I do it. It's talked about it 50 times. It's a series per round. So however long that series went, we were sticking with it. So we did Blue Jays Twins. That was an incredible environment at Target Field. I mean, that's one of the loudest ballparks out there. I mean, those fans were incredibly into it. And then we did Braves Phillies, and that was, a series everyone was looking forward to. And then Phillies Diamondbacks, for the way that turned out was incredible, going 7 games, and finally the World Series. And so just the amount of information you have at your disposal to sort through on a daily basis, it's like just riches of, you don't know, you have to determine what you're gonna use on the air, and obviously bringing in a new audience, and maybe an audience that's not as familiar with the game. So we also explained a lot of, baseball lingo and things like fair and foul, sacrifice flies, bunts, that, and try to explain it concisely to hopefully bring in more fans and expand the game globally. And, it was just an incredible project to be a part of.
did you find that part of it being difficult, trying to just educate a new audience that has never maybe watched baseball? They're familiar with cricket. Obviously, it's similar-ish. Did you find it challenging at all?
Oh, sure. I think it was more that I hadn't thought of explaining some of these things to a friend. It's like, oh, wait, it's a little more complicated to explain. Oh yeah, it's down the first baseline, but to the right of the chalk, but by the way, if it doesn't pass the bag, then it's still a foul ball. But if it goes past the bag and then goes into foul territory, then it's a fair ball. Baseball is so instinctual, and you see it and you react. And certainly in a Rumble Ponies broadcast, we're talking to fans that are very locked into the team and the Mets system and the players and the game on an everyday basis. Here, someone might be watching their first baseball game, and we certainly, and I left it to my terrific analysts, Tejas Garati, Ayush Sharma, Manish Batavia, to explain more of the parallels to cricket, since they announce that on an everyday basis. But certainly, I was like, oh, I should really, yeah, it's a little harder than I thought to explain. And, watching a game, guys, something new comes up every game, and that we haven't always seen. And so I think of game one, I've seen this before, of course, but catcher's interference, that's sort of a complex thing to explain to a fan watching, if you were, showing a kid a game for the first time, to explain catcher's interference. And by the way, it's with the bases loaded in game one of the NLDS in a huge spot. So those were the things, Chris, that were tricky, but it felt like anything. Hopefully we explained it, or I explained it concisely, or my analyst did a great job. And our producer also is very helpful in sort of picking moments as to when it would be a good time to explain something, or reminding me, hey, why don't you explain the runner moving up from second to third, or the sacrifice fly. So yeah, it was great to sort of stretch my broadcasting acumen that way.
So you had to go into like excruciating detail, really, to go, basically explain everything bit by bit, and basically play like baseball for dummies, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like someone's reading the book for the first time.
Right. I think you still try to keep it simple. We're not looking, I'm not going to be able to explain the whole game in the course of one at bat as Royce Lewis hits a huge 2-run homer, and we were encouraged to talk about the game. I think it was tying it into what's happening with the game. That's what made it unique, rather than just sort of haphazardly going into things. And that was where having the live broadcast was the perfect, here's something happening in real time. Let's explain. It's television, so it's not radio. So we can skip a few pitches in explaining what just happened. And of course, there's also more just introducing stars of the game, like Bryce Harper, who went off in the DS and in the first half of the CS, and Zach Wheeler, and just all those players and the impact they have. And then, guys like Corbin Carroll, et cetera. I think storytelling, no matter what the audience, if you're telling a compelling story, people are going to be interested. To me, it's like if a casual fan was watching the game, you're telling stories. And the backdrop of this also is Arjun Nimala was drafted 20th overall by the Blue Jays this past year, highest draft pick ever in across the 4 North American sports for an Indian player. And so we highlighted that as well. And it was cool to have the Blue Jays, even though he's obviously not at the major league level, to have them in the wild card and tie that together. There's some really cool content coming out, may have come out already around him.
It's funny you mentioned the catcher's interference. I would venture a guess there's many a baseball fan out there right now that if there was a catcher's interference or in a baseball game that they were at, they'd be like, I have no clue what just happened, and they'd have to get it explained to them, because they wouldn't understand, like, what do you mean the catcher interfered with the play or something like that? It'd just go right over their heads.
Right. And we're helped because it's an MLB. We're taking the feed, whether it's from TBS or MLB does their own international broadcast of the World Series, and we're getting every angle. So it's a lot easier to explain when you have 10 replays, or I can opine on it and say, it looks close here. Or even on a pickoff. There was Vladimir Guerrero getting picked off at second in the wild card series. That's, might be unique to a fan seeing a game for the first time, but at least from the safe out standpoint, the replays are so crisp, compared to, it's just different in a minor league broadcast by nature. our production, all the productions do a great job, but you're not going to get 10 replays of a play. So we had all the support we could have asked for.
What kind of feedback have you received about about the games being done in India?
Well, I hope they liked it. I think, what's interesting is some of the games were very early in the morning there, and our analysts were up very early in the morning. Reminded me of doing some of those old overnight shifts at WFAN. I mean, vicariously through them. And so, no, I think it was well received, and certainly, I think hopefully, I think everyone's been really happy with it, and again, I just am amazed, even when reading the articles, just how many people are involved and how much hard work is going into expanding the game globally through efforts like these. And obviously, there's the games that are happening in London during the regular season, but there's a continued push, and I think it makes a lot of sense to showcase the best games at, in the postseason games. You're not going to see better baseball than that.
Right.
Do you know if that's a burgeoning market? Like, is India is like baseball becoming like bigger there all all of a sudden?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll defer to the MLB International folks on all the business business things involved. But hey, I think it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, it's one of the largest countries in the world, and as you said, there, I think, Chris, that, there's a lot of cricket parallels and things like that. And so, I imagine, that makes a lot of sense that folks might be interested in watching some baseball.
Yeah. Coming back stateside and going into Binghamton.
Yeah.
You obviously are calling the games for the Binghamton Rumble Ponies, and you called the no-hitter thrown by Yoander Suarez this year.
Yeah.
What was that like? Is that the first no-hitter that you've called, or have you called a no-hitter before that?
I have called, and by the way, just as an aside, Jason, it was crazy to go from the Rumble Ponies making the playoffs. We went deeper into our season than we ever have, or not ever, but in my tenure. And so then going right to the MLB, it was right on the edge of the MLB playoffs. So we were like playing until September 26th or something, and then this all started. So it was like from one playoff season to another. But that was the second no-hitter. The first was in 2019. I came on board in May of 2019, which is pretty unique. Usually a broadcaster would start at the beginning of the season.
Right.
And I came on in May. And this is in the days of the 3-game series, not the 6-game series. And so we did a 6-game. We started the road trip in Portland, and it was 6 games in 4 days. How? Well, all 3 games in Portland the prior month had been snowed out.
Oh man!
So they never left the hotel.
So
my first series was 6 games in 4 days, just trying to figure out what was going on. Everyone's like, "Hey, Portland," and I'm like, give me 5 minutes to like just try to get a game recap out. And so then we went from Portland to Harrisburg, and the second game of the Harrisburg series, the Rumble Ponies had not thrown a no-hitter in about 13 years. My poor predecessor, the great Jim Hyman, legendary run, 9 years, with the Ponies, never got to call a no-hitter. In my, I should know the exact total, 8th game, Harold Gonzalez and Ryder Ryan combined for a no-hitter against Harrisburg. So quite a run, quite a start on that road trip. And then we did have one in 21, but it was sort of a semi post-COVID year, so we weren't traveling. But Josh Walker started it. Andrew Mitchell finished it in Reading, but I didn't call that one. And so this was my second. And it shows. You just never know. It goes back to what we were talking about with MLB India. This is the first game of a doubleheader, and we were fighting to. We were in a very good position to clinch a playoff. The Rumble Ponies were in a very good position to clinch a playoff spot. So every game mattered. But this was one of those that got crazy with the rain and the weather and the whole thing in Hartford. And but Yoander had gotten off to this amazing start. Had allowed like one hit in I think his debut. He was on a roll. I mean, he made it look easy. There really weren't many plays where he was challenged. And so the unique part of that was to call a no-hitter and see it build and build, and then the team had to come back on the field and play 30 minutes later with it being part of a doubleheader. But it doesn't take anything away from, first of all, Yoander doing it himself, and at the same time, how dominant he was, and the accomplishment. But it was unique in that there wasn't the sort of typical celebration, I guess you'd say.
Right, and it was a 7-inning no hitter, right?
7-inning no hitter. That's right. So, but he could have gone. I'll tell you, Jason, he could have cruised through 9. That was.
He had the stuff that night.
He was pretty much in control. Yeah.
The Rumble Ponies had an average first half of the season. They went 35 and 34 before the trade deadline, which gave them some new talent that came in. And that set them up for a 39-20 second half of the season. How big of a factor were those newly acquired prospects, including Luis Angel Acuna and Drew Gilbert, to the team's second half success?
Oh, yeah, huge. Well, and a couple of others, too. Chris, I'd add Jeremiah Jackson in, who came in the Dominic Leone trade. He really was, first of all, an impressive guy, and a guy that can hit for power. And then we had the unique situation of JT Schwartz coming off the IL in the summer, and that was almost like a new addition. I mean, JT was great the first month of the year, missed about 65 games due to injury, comes back on a tear. And so now you have basically 4 new guys. And, Luis Angel, the way he affects a game with his speed. I mean, I think we're even seeing, this was just the appetizer of what we saw from him. I mean, I think you're going to see the numbers just skyrocket as he gets more comfortable. But once he's able to get on base, seal second, anticipate a wild pitch at third, he would score on normal ground balls that others wouldn't. Meaning infield's in, they're playing to throw him, to cut him down, and he would still score. But I also think the pitching, which was a constant early in the year, excuse me, continued to really dominate. Christian Scott, Blade Tidwell, coming up, and then Tyler Stewart. All these guys really were. It was like we were seeing a deja vu of a guy having an incredible debut at the AA level. And then obviously at the end, Kevin Parada, Jet Williams coming up. Kevin had a 3-run homer in a game. Jet had, some big hits, including in the playoffs. So those guys made a big impact too. And I'd add Rowdy Jordan in that list, who's been with us all year. But it felt like instead of it being, all right, the Rumble Ponies might win this game, it was they're going to win it, just a matter of how. They might be down in the 9th, but Rowdy had a big walk-off hit, something like that. So players like that, a guy like Rowdy Jordan is a big factor too.
What was the demeanor going into the playoffs, knowing that Somerset had won both the first and second halves?
That's a good question, Chris. It's funny because I'm not sure that there was so much thought given to that. It's all pretty quick the way it unfolds. I mean, we knew that Binghamton was going to play Somerset. But I think it was less about Somerset winning the first and second half and more, to go back to what we were talking about, the Rumble Ponies momentum and how good they were. And so I think everyone I don't want to speak for the Somerset folks, but when we talk with their folks and their broadcasters, there was a sense Binghamton, I'll give Steve Cusimano credit that he's the voice of the Patriots and a buddy of mine. He said when we played them in early August, I think, he's like, we're going to see you again. and he was right. And that's when things were just getting started with the new additions. But I think it was this sense of that, wow, Binghamton's coming in with a lot of momentum. I think it is more of an objective statement. They had some of the most talent. They were compared to a AA All-Star team. And so if not the most talented, one of the most talented teams in all of the minor leagues. So I think everyone felt pretty good that they could handle or take on anyone. Now you never know what's going to happen in a 3-game series. And certainly not underestimating Somerset, who's always, I mean, Drew Thorpe is a monster. But I think there was a sense of confidence, not arrogance, but confidence. Certainly weren't going to be intimidated going into the series. And so it was less about the fact that they won both the first and second half. I think that was less of a thought and more, hey, we're just playing so well over the last month. They had won like 16 of 20 games, something like that. It was a crazy stretch. So it's like any team in the major league playoffs. When you come in hot, the world's your oyster.
And baseball is so random like that too. I mean, especially getting into the playoffs. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, look what happened at the major league level.
Right. And a best of 3, look, I think there was a sense, all right, certainly going into the championship series. I mean, Binghamton gets off to a hot start in game 1. Erie comes back and wins that game. You travel to Erie the next day and they win 10-0, and that's it. So it's pretty quick. If you thought the MLB playoffs were quick, I mean, I guess the wild card is a best of 3 too. So it's most similar to that.
As you mentioned, the Rumble Ponies made it to their first Eastern League Championship Series since 2014, lost to Erie in 2 games.
Right.
A bit of a disappointing end to the season, but I think looking at the bigger picture, it gave Mets fans a lot of things to be happy about. I mean, what were some of your big takeaways from the 2023 season?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think you look at this run in the second half. I mean, it was such an incredible team with really great guys. And I'm not just saying that, but we're around these guys on a day in, day out basis, and you're at the batting cage with them and you're seeing their preparation. And Reed Brignac does a great job as the manager of the team. He finished his second year. And the coaching staff put so much effort in. I mean, AJ Sager named the Mets organizational staff member of the year. Jet named the player of the year. Christian named the pitcher of the year for the Mets. And Hayden Sanger, for instance, we haven't talked about, gets the platinum glove, as the best defender in the system. So there's just so many, and you just think of different moments. This was a team that was great in walk-off situations. Rowdy Jordan had 3 walk-off hits. And I think of guys in the first half, Matt Rudick, who I think is going to be a guy you're hearing from, just in terms of his future, and really found his power surge this year. Brandon McElwain. I mean, I think of the guys as well that were great with us at AA and then went up to AAA and raked. Brandon McElwain, Joe Swazi, Wyatt Young, Mike Vassell, of course. When you look at the baseball season, it's really sort of different chapters. And that April-May chapter, just, it's a totally different team when you look at how the roster by the end of the year. But at each stage, certainly the record got exponentially better in the second half post-trade deadline. But, part of the joy of doing this is the stories and the players, their development, and to see that throughout the course of the year, and then to be calling games for a team in the playoffs and to knock off a team of the caliber of Somerset. Dom Hamill with a lights out effort in that final game. That guy, he is tough. He's got some brass, as they say. So, it was just incredible. I feel like I'm missing guys, but it was so many different stories. I mean, Dom, I think at the times he struck out 11 guys 3 different times, and Matt Levine, my broadcast partner, and I we sort of joked, we're the lucky ones, I mean, you don't want to see me hit or pitch. I mean, it's our privilege to really call the game. And it's great that certainly unfortunate in terms of the Mets record, but the byproduct of that was obviously an increased attention on our guys, and they deserve it. And that was exciting too, to be able to see the energy that Mets fans have and passion to follow them along.
You mentioned a couple of former number one picks in Kevin Prada and Jet Williams. They both made it pretty. They went through the lower levels of minor league baseball somewhat quickly to get up to Double-A already. How successful were they adjusting with both of them? How successful were they adjusting to Double-A?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just reading an article, and Jet went up 4 levels. All this year. Not too bad. In the relative sense, both came up, I think, in mid-September. So it was a pretty limited sample size. And as I said, both made big contributions. But I was just reading an article by Tim Healy of Newsday on Kevin today. He caught up with him at the Fall League. And he just talked about the challenges of struggling hitting for the first time, getting better at throwing. I mean, we haven't talked about the defensive side of this equation too. Jet is a guy that seems at 19, he's 19 going on 30 in terms of, and Kevin's great too. They're both very mature, but Jet being only 19, I was just amazed. He's just so cool, so mature, and so good. So I think, but it was still just a couple of weeks, and I think it's going to be fun wherever they end up level wise next year. But to see them, continue to progress.
And speaking of both of those players, right? They both occupy positions that are pretty much occupied long term in New York right now, right? You have Francisco Lindor at shortstop. You have Francisco Alvarez at catcher. Has there been anything that you've heard of, any possibilities of moving them to other positions with Binghamton to get them some action to, see if they can adjust to another position?
Yeah, I don't know. We're just, I'm just the broadcaster that puts on the headset, and I think by nature it's spring training, some of that gets sorted out as well. But I was going to say on the defensive side, I think of a guy like Rowdy Jordan, to go back, and I don't get paid by the amount of times I mention Rowdy's name, is he played second base, which he had done in high school, but he was really a center fielder in college. He's played different outfield spots. So versatility and the way he adapted was impressive. And so I think versatility is something certainly that Reed, Brignac, the goal is to get these guys reps sometimes at different spots, so they can, it's like if you're applying for a job, the more skills you have, the better.
Right.
One of the things that the Mets really need is help with the starting rotation. Is there anyone, the Rumble Ponies, that might be in the best position to help shore up the starting rotation in the near future? Maybe even the bullpen in the near future?
Yeah, I don't know. I can tell you about the guys that have really done great with us and how how that fits in the big league picture. That's one thing that we stray away from. It's really the Mets' decision of how it all plays. But I'll tell you, Tyler Stewart. I mean, these are tall guys too. I mean, he was just dominant. Blade obviously gets a lot of attention, and he's nasty. And you talked about Yolander and Dom, and it's an exorbitant amount of riches that the Mets have to play with, and also in the bullpen. There were really some impressive guys. Nate Lavender is someone who really stood out to us early on. I was so happy to see it. Talk about how you don't know who might shine. Josh Walker is an incredible story, and obviously made his debut. And so, and he was a guy in his later 20s, I think, left-hander and a great guy, and he's pitching in Queens. So, it's always fun to see those stories, as well. And I think, part of the Rumble Ponies' success as well was the bullpen and how much of a role, that they played. Paul Gervais at the end of the year, LSU guy, but started in North Carolina junior college. I mean, he got the last out to clinch the playoff series. And there were just guys that constantly kept on getting promoted from that standpoint. And again, credit to AJ Sager. So sometimes those guys have hybrid roles too. The Jose Buteau this year, obviously, was a guy that had a lot of success with us last year. So that's why it's hard to predict, in November what a need might be. Certainly, to give you guys some context, Justin Verlander made a rehab start with us in May. I don't think, obviously him ending up, with the Astros was probably not something most people foresaw at that moment. So that's another thing as well. You just don't know how it's going to shape out.
Your job, Jacob, with Binghamton, you're the play-by-play broadcaster, but you also wear a lot of other hats.
Yeah.
So when you call the final out of the game, what happens after that? What do you do?
Oh, you know what? A lot of it's both pregame and postgame.
Yeah.
After a game, Matt, my broadcast partner and assistant, will write a game recap. But if I'm on the road alone, I'll write the game recap. So folks are always disappointed if they come to visit on the road and they're like, aren't we leaving? No, I actually have to write this recap. I'll meet you at the restaurant. But before the game, basically we'll handle, or what might happen is a reporter might want to talk to a player, of course, and we'll set that up after the game. I deliver box scores at home to both managers and the coaching staffs and just make sure everyone has that. And I do our post-game show, obviously, on the air, but that's part of the game broadcast. So that all takes up a good chunk of time. For the game, though, when you're at home, there's a lot more responsibilities. You're almost like a host to the other team. Obviously, we're literally hosting the team, but as the broadcaster, we put out the stat packs, and make sure that those get to the coaching staffs. Home or away, you handle any media requests there might be. And so it could be a local interview where a TV station wants to talk with a player. It could be, a writer from one of the newspapers in New York that's coming up. It could be a phoner, might be something in-house. So we should, and then there's, events like when we had a big media day in New Jersey, actually, right after the trade, Acuna and Gilbert came and Jackson, and we did 6 different players, 3 pitchers, 3 hitters. And that was, an incredible environment to have all these folks out, and interested in the players. So it's a little different than just focusing, as you said. It's all helpful in preparing for the broadcast, like the things that are said in those media day availabilities are certainly things we, can incorporate into the broadcast. But certainly the job requires good organization. Maybe I have that. I'm still working on it in year 5, year 6. But also, everything's sort of building on each other. Like my assistant works on the game notes, and that certainly helps in the preparation for the broadcast. We make sure lineup cards are printed for the press box, at home. So there's just a lot of different things that might come up. And then you're trying to get most of them done before you get to the batting cage, because that's almost like sacred time to be able to lock in.
Let's talk about your career. So you grew up on Long Island. When did you develop an interest in broadcasting?
Yeah, I developed, it really started, Kevin, pretty early. For maybe up till middle school, I wanted to be a car dealer, and I still love cars. I get my Motor Trend. I randomly peek in. I don't go inside their cars, but I look inside their windows. What's the center dash look like, etc. But around 12 or 13, I didn't play a lot of sports growing up, but I always was interested in them. And I don't know when the exact moment that it came together. I was always, a good communicator. And so the two sort of married each other. And I got a book when I graduated elementary school, called The Art of Sportscasting. And it's by a guy named Tom Hendrick, I believe, or it might be Kendrick. He's a broadcaster in Kansas. And he talked about a Tom Hedrick. Yep. He talked about how people would go to the games and young broadcasters would go to a game and bring a tape recorder. And I sort of was like, oh, that's interesting. And even I had read a book, but not about broadcasting, but one of the first books I read was by Tim McCarver, and the way he broke down the game, and I loved it. Obviously, him coming from an analyst standpoint. But anyway, this book talked about bringing a tape recorder, and I started doing that, and was fortunate enough. We went to Yankee games growing up because my dad's a big Yankees fan, and would bring my tape recorder to the game and do a mock broadcast. And I created Yes Network Radio because I thought that wasn't taken. I was really managing the copyright infringement, like they were going to go after me for a tape that only I was listening to. And yeah, that became, I became incredibly passionate about it. And the rest is sort of history, and really looked at college with a focus of going to a school that had a good program for that, and Penn State certainly fit the bill, and always wanted to pursue a career in it. So it just really built on each other, and I still have that same passion, guys. It's a tough business, no doubt, but 13 years later, I mean, we talked about storytelling with whether it's for an Indian audience or for a Rumble Ponies audience. I love the preparation. I love the engaging of players to, find the story, and then the actual art of it and doing the game. My passion is as strong as ever.
And so you mentioned you went to Penn State.
Yeah.
Did you think about going to any of or apply to go to any of those big time broadcasting schools, or that big time Oswego State broadcasting school?
Well, I think the Penn State people they view us as a big time broadcasting school. So
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, just to protect Jason, I want you to be welcomed on campus. So
okay, I'm a Michigan fan, so they probably won't like me anyway.
Oh well, interesting times. I see you got the Michigan game on in the back. Who are they playing?
St. John's.
Oh, that's right. The games are that's right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn that on after we're done. But no, I did look at Syracuse heavily. I thought I was going to Syracuse from like in my head, had not spoken admissions. I didn't consult admissions on that.
They didn't get the
when
memo.
I was a freshman. Yeah, they didn't. But I looked, and actually, I certainly looked at Boston University, Ithaca, wonderful program. We have a lot of interns from there with the Rumble Ponies. But Penn State just felt like home, and was very comfortable with the people, and have still maintained those relationships, and very connected to the university, and like doing mentoring and things alumni based all the time. So a lot of great excellent schools out there. But yeah, certainly my parents knew I was looking. I was the focus wasn't an issue.
You had mentioned WFAN earlier, in our conversation. What was that experience like working there?
Yeah, it was, I had I obviously grew up like so many, I'm sure like you guys, listening to the fan, and Mike and Dog, got to put it on in the car when, you're getting picked up from school. Dog probably, ranting about the Giants or something, but, San Francisco Giants. And I interned with the fan my junior year going into my senior year. And that was, really cool to be around all those people, and, always stayed in touch with them. And we were talking off air where I was sort of got in the fold through 10 wins, and obviously had the prior relationship having intern there, but doing updates for wins led to doing updates at fan. And it was, I've been lucky in my career to have these sort of surreal moments. And that certainly was one of them. And to be on the air with Mike and doing updates, on a couple of his shows was a thrill. Steve Summers, who, if we talk about, was a guest on my podcast back when I did it, legendary figure, all those guys. And the fan culture, it's one of those things. Once you're in, you're always connected to it. It's not just a place on the resume. So that's what makes the place special. And it's I'm honored to be a small part of their incredible, and a very small part of their incredible lineage. But it's nice to stay in touch. We had a wedding of one of the producers last year, and to see Bob Husler and all the folks, Mink, there's just nothing like the fan. Yeah.
No, those guys you mentioned, Bob Husler, John Minko, had been there for decades. John
Yes.
Minko, recently retired after
Right.
30 years at least.
Right.
At the
Yeah.
Insane that just the number of people that had been there almost pretty much since it started in 1987, and including Steve Summers, and it really is. I mean, Jacob, it is kind of like being in a family where you work there for even just a short while and you keep in touch with people for the rest of your life. So
yes. Yes.
Definitely.
And I was there for 6.5 years. So
okay.
And it's not just the on air, it's really the behind the scenes folks as well that you pick up, Eddie Schizzeri, who you hear is sort of an on air fixture on the morning show, Boomer and Geo, one of the kindest people I know, incredible person. So yeah, it was nice to get back there earlier this year and just to visit and catch up with the folks.
So from your experience at WFAN and all their sister stations down in New York City under Odyssey, the Odyssey umbrella.
Yeah.
What led you to work at the Binghamton Rumble Ponies?
Good question. Yeah, I was doing updates for FAN and Sirius XM, and always doing play-by-play as well. And that was always the goal, to be doing play-by-play. And obviously, I never took for granted the platform that I had, at FAN and all those stations, and Sirius with MLB Radio, and working with Dog. You doing updates for Dog Show was amazing. But I always wanted to do more and more play-by-play and really make that the full time. And that was with the full support of the folks that were there. Eric Spitz, who's now at Sirius XM, Mark Chernoff, who was a longtime program director, who was also part of that fabric of the station. And so, they were fully supportive of me sort of looking around, and, I'd go to the winter meetings and more for, just networking purposes. And this opportunity came about, in a very different way, and wasn't looking. And, my predecessor, Tim, he now works, for Binghamton University and all that, but he was, leaving the position for a different job. And, what is it, life? Good timing and, preparation, sets you up for luck is the residue of like hard, preparation or whatever. So you're looking, and then I figured in 2019, well, nothing had really come about before the season. So, I figured maybe I'd try to find something summer league. Well, still you had the New York Penn League and that sort of thing. And I had done minor league baseball in the New York Penn League for the Hudson Valley Renegades right out of college. But this came about, and it was pretty much a no-brainer. I'm going to be the lead guy, and do all the games and travel with the team. And so I think I was offered the job on a Wednesday, and then 2 weeks later I was, up there, accepted the job like that day. It all happened very quickly. It wasn't some extensive, they didn't know what they were getting into with me. No, but yeah, it all happened very quickly. And I knew Binghamton was, growing up in Long Island, a lot of my friends went to SUNY Binghamton. So it wasn't like I wasn't aware of the area. And so it seemed like a really good fit in that sense as well, and has been. But yeah, it was like, then that's, I've been there. That was back 5 years ago in 2019. And obviously a lot has happened in the world with COVID and all those, and the changes in baseball. But it's been more than I ever could have imagined as we enter, I guess, year 6 next year.
You said you called Hudson Valley Renegades games after you graduated college. Did you call games in college? And how'd you get into that? How'd you get into that role?
Yeah, and that goes back to when you're looking at a school. And I think this happens to you. I mean, you're sort of interviewing obviously you have to get in, but you're interviewing the school as much in a way to know what opportunities might be there, as much as they're telling you about the school. So one of the appeals of Penn State, and the program's grown tremendously from when I entered there in 2006, it was already growing then, was there was an opportunity to get involved very early in Com Radio, it's called, which is the student state radio station, and it's on the internet. And so, but there was still enough that wasn't sort of fully complete where, for instance, we didn't have a football pregame show that was extensive, and there was the ability to create one, where we could have all these guests on and Brent Musburger and it's just it was amazing, but there's a Center for Sports Journalism there, but most importantly, you have just so many sports that you can announce. Some of my first games were volleyball games as a freshman, and then I did softball, and it's even grown now where the students are involved so much in Big Ten Student U, or I think it's called Big Ten Plus now, where it was just starting at the end where I did a few wrestling matches that aired on Big Ten Network, so now if you go in, Jason, and you're not taking advantage of those opportunities, you're probably behind. So that's one of the big appeals, and obviously for folks interested. And I hosted a show in college too, so I always enjoyed interviewing. But if you're interested in the sports talk host route, there's that avenue. There was we traveled. The station travels still for football games. So it's really a matter of the opportunity combined with obviously the internships, which is a big part in, developing the relationships. But to have an operation like Penn State Athletics and to be able to interact with those people on a day-to-day basis was invaluable.
Right. You hosted a podcast called Let's Talk a few years ago, which covered topics including sports media and mental health.
Yeah.
What did you take away from that initiative, and what brought you to that podcast?
Yeah, I think I'd always, again, the interviewing part really always appealed to me. And so it was a way to do more of these sit down interviews, someone like Steve Summers to really talk with them. And I always found career path to be interesting. And so that was the sports media part. And then I always found the mental side of sports, or folks overcoming adversity or resilience, to be a particular interest. So I interviewed Brett Gravitt, who was paralyzed in an accident, but was a men's soccer player, and would talk with Trenny Kuznarek, who's been open about depression, and those were just interesting topics, and more just paths of players and coaches and staff members, and so that's sort of like I always say, a different muscle in my brain, the interviewing muscle, which I really enjoy. Calling a game, it's almost like the Saturday night party. It's action. It's interviewing. It's like the Sunday brunch. It's reflective. It's it's a little calmer. But so that was just a way to do that, and would certainly have always been interested in doing more of that.
Now that you've been in the Binghamton area for the past several years, was it an easy adjustment to make from New York City area to upstate New York?
Yeah, it's different and a lot less traffic upstate. Being back downstate, man, oh man. And then I was talking we're trying to coordinate Thanksgiving, and it's like to get from New Jersey to Long Island, it's like my mother's saying they now live in Florida, but they're still talking New York traffic. Like, you got to leave early. It's like, okay, we get it, but even the trains, and it's like, it's always like, it's a little bit of a wake up call the first time you're on the subway, and I love it, but the platform were delayed by 10 minutes. It's like, oh boy, you get it big into something that takes 20 minutes to get to, feels like a long time. But it's nice to be able, and I get back here pretty often in the off season. Obviously, it's a little different with having done the MLB work here, so I stayed down a little bit longer. But no, I love Binghamton. It's an incredibly supportive community, and there's a lot going on with the university. Binghamton is like a top school, and one of the cool things that I've had the opportunity to do is to be an adjunct professor there in sports journalism. So that's another muscle that I really enjoyed. I couldn't do it because of the MLB work this year, but the last couple of fall semesters, that's been a project that I sort of tried to get off the ground, because I had done a lot of mentoring work with Penn State. I thought, geez, maybe I could do this adjunct professor thing. And got connected with the right people. And, Binghamton doesn't have a big journalism program, but there was certainly a lot of interest in sports just based on the population and Mets, a lot of Long Island, just around the state. We had some Albany people. Don't worry, Chris. The class was vetted. It was, geographically, we covered all parts of the Empire State. But I really enjoyed that because that was really fun to teach. And my mother was a teacher for 30 years in Brooklyn doing resource room or special ed. So yeah, I'm just amazed by the university, and the Rumble Ponies are a big fixture. So it's a very different setup than a New York City type setup, but I think having experienced both has been very positive.
Jacob, thank you so much for joining us for the Throwing Bagels podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, I enjoyed it. Thank you guys, and appreciate you having me on.
And that was Binghamton Rumble Ponies play-by-play broadcaster, also MLB Network postseason for India play-by-play broadcaster Jacob Wilkins. That was a lot of fun, guys.
Yeah, that was a great interview. I find it very interesting, the whole baseball broadcasting for India. I wish I would have heard it just because I kind of want to understand a little bit better, like how in depth they had to go for it. You know what I mean? Like, obviously he said they're not going super in depth, but you have to like explain it to them. I don't feel like a lot of people in India completely understand baseball.
Oh yeah. Most likely not. Most likely not.
I remember years ago, I was at was it Shea Stadium? I think it was at Shea Stadium. And someone who clearly was not from this country turned around to me and said, what is baseball? I'm like, oh boy.
That's a loaded question, my friend. You got 3 hours?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
minimum.
Like, where do you start? Like, where out? You have to talk about outs and bases and
balls and strikes.
I mean, just trying to explain it to like my kids is hard enough. Yeah, I can't imagine
you almost just have to like explain it as you go instead of telling people the rules up front in a vacuum. Just like, I think that's the approach that Jacob took and MLB took, was just explain it as it happens. Yeah. And not get too worried about what the difference is between a fork ball and a splitter and like, let's not get that nuanced.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's funny though that they had a catcher's interference, because how often do you even see that in general? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to even have that happen during the broadcast is pretty funny, because you could go see like years worth of games and never run into a catcher's interference.
Right. And your point was valid too, Jay, that maybe even the average baseball player here in the States probably has no idea that rule even exists.
Yeah. It's at 100%. Like, I could guarantee you there are people playing the game of baseball that it would happen. They'd be like, what did I do? Huh? What? Like they wouldn't even understand. They didn't even realize that they committed some sort of like an infraction, but that's a different story.
So I know we were talking a little bit, and this kind of plays into the blog I wrote last time. We put it out last Monday about like who from New York is going to take home the next title, right? And so Nobody. We're going on
ever.
We're going on
maybe the Rangers.
Maybe.
I mean, they're off to a really good start.
But we look at, it seemed when the NFL season began, right? Okay, let's think about this. When the NFL season, before the season started, people were like, the Giants are going to be really good. The Jets are going to be really good. Super Bowl contenders, Aaron Rodgers. The Bills are going to be right there as well, Josh Allen, etc. So we could see maybe a Super Bowl champion come out of those three. And now that we're halfway through the season, holy cow, I don't know that it could have gotten any worse for any of those
it could have gotten even worse, but not much, but it could have gotten worse.
Yeah. I mean, the Giants stink. They're offensive line stinks. They got a guy named DeVito for the most part quarterback.
He's basically as tall as Danny.
I mean, he may as well be Danny DeVito standing back there.
Man, you got Zach Wilson quarterbacking the Jets because
Oh,
Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles within 4 plays.
Yeah.
Then you got
not only is he playing
poorly.
Salah is saying he's playing really well right now. What are you watching?
That's nothing. I was listening to ESPN radio today, and they were saying they had Rex Ryan on. Rex Ryan, man, he's become a homer for the Jets. Let me tell you, this guy is like, Zach Wilson is doing very well, and he is growing in the position. I'm like, growing in the position? The guy can't throw the ball 5 yards down the field without like literally throwing into the ground. Dude, he has no instincts for the game of football whatsoever.
Yeah.
What are you watching?
He just doesn't have it. And you know, I mean, we can debate.
He's got talent, just
sure. Well,
you know,
now let's say this: like every NFL player that we talk about has ridiculous amounts of talent, right? It's just all perspective. Like he stinks as a quarterback for the NFL. Like let's just plain and simple, he stinks.
He'll be in the XFL.
You can debate
something like that.
Yeah. You can debate, you know, Daniel Jones, whether he stinks or not. Like that's all still up for debate. And if you're still debating it now, it means you don't have a quarterback.
You're right. I mean, I personally don't think Daniel Jones stinks. I actually think if the Giants had an offensive line that could literally protect any quarterback in history of football, whether it be Dan Marino or Joe Montana or Steve Young or any great quarterback, and you give the guy more than 2 seconds to throw a ball, you know, and not have someone bearing down on him and literally taking his neck off, then I think Daniel Jones would be fine. The guy has a lot of talent. He can run, he can pass. He just has no time to literally snaps the ball, takes 3 steps, and he's done. That's it. Like you've got no place to go. It's
okay, but when he has had the protection, he doesn't find the correct receiver. Like that's the thing. Like when Tyrod Taylor had that same time, he was finding the correct receiver.
Right. No, I understand
the ball down the field. He was throwing the ball like he had the vision. Obviously, he's a veteran. He had the vision of the whole field. But Daniel Jones, what is he in his 5th year now? His 4th year, 5th year?
This is his 5th year.
He hasn't reached that yet. Like,
but part of the problem is he's also like, yes, I agree with you, but at the same time, the guy has how many head coaches and offensive coordinators has he gone through? Right. This was going to be the year where I finally have some stability because I have the same head coach and the same offensive coordinator. And then he literally was under assault. Like literally the cops should have just like arrested the Cowboys in week 1 because they assaulted him. Like he had no chance of the ball. And then Daboll left him out there to get killed.
Well,
and then one of Jones's other bad attributes is that he did, instead of stepping out of bounds, he decides to be the tough guy and run through big guys. I'm like, dude, just live another day. Live another day, man.
So here's my hot take on the Daniel Jones situation.
Hot take. Okay.
I don't think Daboll likes him at all. I think he secretly just hates him.
He's trying to kill him.
Why does he leave him out there?
I don't know.
What are you doing?
I have no idea why he leaves him out there.
Maybe there's a conspiracy. Just to listen, if he gets hurt, maybe we can tank the season. We'll get a top 2 quarterback, maybe. Just saying. I'm just a reckless speculation, conspiracy theory.
Well, next time you hear from us, it'll be after Thanksgiving. So we hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving with friends and family. And Chris and Jason, same to you guys.
Yeah, you as well, guys.
Same to you.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we will see you after that. So check us out online, throwingbagels.com. Email us, throwingbagelspodcast@gmail.com. You can follow our social media by visiting our website, and keep in touch. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.